Bridget, you got us? Thank you, ma'am. All right, I know minutes were just put in front of you, pretty much, so if you want to wait till next time to approve them, or if anybody wants to glance through them, do you see anything that jumps out?
I have some edits, but I'll forward this to Bridget.
Okay,
It's on item 4A. The first line there says the copy is included, highlighted in yellow.
Mhm.
That was the handout that Roxanne provided us.
I'll get to her to add
Okay.
these minutes.
I was gonna say, I have a copy if you need it.
Yeah, I got it. Yeah, we need to.
I didn't see anything.
all right, we'll accept the motion if we're good with them, or we want to table?
I have no problem. That's what it is. Mr. Chairman, with the addition, and that Roxanne will provide.
All right, we have a motion. Well, that was Billy's.
I think that was-
Billy's was the motion, and second. All right, all in favor? Aye. And Roxanne and Bridget will get together with those little highlighted parts and correct that.
I do have one question.
Oh, you gotta speak up, man. We don't know how to approve it. What you got?
There's nothing to disapprove.
Oh, what you got?
Is there a delineation between my name and Junior's name?
It should.
Yes.
Hold on.
Do we want?
Wait, on the first page, under, introducing him, we need to add, I'll add this in here, senior.
And it says on item 2, Mr. Donati seconded. A senior.
Yep, got it.
Great catch.
Good.
You don't want to get your son in any more trouble or give him more credit than he deserves.
All right, next we have the strategic plan review again. We finally have the full strategic plan. Did everybody get that link? You may not get that, have a chance. We can do a little discussion on it before we go into the, some presentation from the subcommittee. Don, you had sent some stuff, I don't know.
I'm trying to pull it up.
Oh, you're trying to pull it up? Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, I have a copy, someone wants to run. Can we make copies here? I have a copy, so I've got my scribble on it.
Here, you want to take this one? This one's just the basic.
Got my junk on it. It's red.
Do, 14.
Bad.
Did you have some of yours?
I didn't get it. I mean,
Okay.
I think, if we've got some comments on it, in places where, certainly in place where it changed, from that last iteration where we had kind of the more extended support document that went along with it, we could update that. If whatever it's like, it would be a good idea.
Yeah.
I certainly have that for next week.
I mean, I'll just say kind of my piece on it while Don was looking for his comments. He had emailed me, and Dave had some too. The thing about me was a little bit of lack of direction on the residential side. I think we got a very specific goal on the commercial side, and have a good foothold in moving toward that with some, discussion and some things that'll come out of that. But, I felt like on the residential side, they didn't really. Yeah.
It was broad based.
Very, very broad, like, and yeah. I just would have liked to see a little more of a goal out of that so that we could figure out a strategy to get there. As opposed to just
See that
a big
marked
broad.
up in that section. That's a my red into that section. Didn't
Right.
think about the economic development, I did have a question with that.
I was curious to the order of the priorities and how they didn't align with what was in the comp plan. It seemed reversed. Was that intentional or is that by mistake or?
I thought it would have been intentional in reversing some of the previous boards, because remember, the one that's in the comp plan, strategic plan, was the last board. So this is the new boards, or the existing boards.
You take, and addressing a little bit off of housing into economic development, back to Matt's point. If their number one objective, that we seem to have zoned in on is 85-15, would that be a fair statement?
Yes,
If you look at their priority, that's number 4
In the comp plan.
in this document, strategic plan, it's number 4. It goes behind encourage development of quality product and associated infrastructure that is attractive to business and industry. Then it's to develop and support programs, processes, and activities to encourage expansion, location of sustainable businesses in the county. And number 3 is retain existing businesses is a high priority. The present employers and job opportunities should be maintained and enhanced. Then finally, you get to work to get your 85-15.
sure. So my opinion would be the first 3 are kind of internal things that are really more staff driven, and the 4th one is where it's the first one that we have input as far as changing things in the comp plan. Does that make sense? Or?
Well, and that kind of went to one of my questions. If we're gonna take an abstract map exercise, let's just use that as a dialogue. Are we then are they, I guess, maybe they're assuming that we would then maybe make suggestions on ordinance and changes in zoning classification changes to support that? Or, I mean, back what you're talking about, to me, if you're gonna do encourage quality development of product, are you then gonna go change your standards?
Right.
And so do we need a blanket statement that says, study these areas?
So I
Or
guess,
do-
and I guess that's what I was looking for is, I'm not the expert in that. I would think that that's more of a direction to staff than it is necessarily the citizens work group.
Okay.
But I think we ought to at least, if that comes up, we ought to at least, at a minimum, note it. Hey,
Yes.
we need to look at ordinance X, Y, Z.
Sure.
Because I think the charter is, we take the strategic plan and see what we need to do to the comprehensive plan to match up with this quote, new
Right.
vision. And so if we have to change the future land use map or recommend to change the future land use map or recommend, hey, we need to do this to an ordinance or look at these ordinances, then in my view, we clearly ought to do that.
If there's, and let's just use the term we've been using in our work group that we used last week, economic opportunity and an economic priority. If that's all about creating clarity, to the public, I think was the point, was to try to get rid of all this gray area as much as possible, then I think it wouldn't hurt to do some rolling sleeves up in a broad basis and say ordinances in the following areas create gray or misunderstanding, create clarity into that. I don't disagree that we would be trying to go through ordinances.
Right, that's where I'm going in my head with that is,
We'd be.
this
here
document is
next
enough to chew on for 3 months.
But I think
dig
it wouldn't
into
hurt if there's some
ordinances.
areas that
Sure.
that consistently come up in the public
Right.
sides, that we maybe suggest that staff and planning commission are the ones that roll up their sleeves and look into the ordinances. There are some conflicts in
Oh, yeah, I agree to that.
that. And,
Yeah, so tie that statement together that we know they exist and pass that,
Call it out.
call it out and pass that buck to the staff. I mean, yeah, I'm with you there. I don't think we want to take on going through a zoning ordinance or a subdivision ordinance
I've done that.
between now and April.
Not interested.
Yeah, okay.
Two comments that I'll make about, when I looked at the plan, it relates to housing. There's 2 things that kind of jump out that I think we're going to have to address. And I know it's not on the agenda today, but I'm just going to go ahead and plant a seed. One of them is this quote or phrase about a variety of housing solutions. So, and then making it more accessible to different socioeconomic groups and so forth. So, to me, that's two things that are different to me than what we were targeting prior to this strategic plan, and two things that we need to keep in mind about how not to say we agree with the strategic vision, it's not their strategic vision, it's the board's, but this is what they said, so that we need to see, are there certain solutions we can offer up to help meet, for example, those two things, variety and accessibility.
Well, that's one of the things that I was, in my housing note, I said, so now that we have the strategic plan in two topics, so to speak, one being economic development, and you read it, you're trying to, that's okay, I think I know where they're going. The other one's housing, and one of the things that I kind of asked a couple of supervisors was, they just created a work group, another work group, in relationship to housing.
Well, I want to clarify, the board did not do that. The board was asked to give them some names. That committee belongs to Habitat for Humanity. Is that who you're talking about? Is that the same board?
But if the board adopted it, they voted on it, and they're bringing suggestions, they've been charged with bringing suggestions,
Giving names, yeah. But
and it's created.
I'm
and
just,
my
because I
question-
had the same question, and I was told specifically, that's not, this is the board's group that they assigned. That is a,
But what I was trying to understand, if they're gonna make a recommendation, we're making recommendations.
with you, which is what brought up my question is, well, what are they doing?
And I was told they are
that-
focusing on more of, the term is, a couple of them used. We're broad-based, they're kind of delving with affordability more than anything. There were some tremendously talented individuals that signed up for that.
Absolutely.
And I looked at the resumes, but I just thought, wow, are we duplicating, are we creating?
Which is kind of the same thought that I had, is that why we have the two different groups. But
We were broad-based or whatever.
And I was told they were specific to Habitat for Humanity's project. That's the way it was worded to me.
I didn't get that information, but it doesn't matter. You're the chairman, so hopefully that's what,
But I hear you. I mean, they're gonna have some kind of recommendation that I think would answer specifically the socioeconomical side of it. Is what I was understanding that their task is. Cause that, I mean, in reality, and reading David's email and kind of chewing on some of that, I mean, that again is a lot deeper than we're gonna be able to get into in these few months. I mean, that's, you're talking about federal things, you're talking about state things that you've got to deal with. And we still haven't answered the question to me as to what's affordable, so. Yeah. I mean, that's,
affordable to me and affordable to somebody else, different definitions.
absolutely, absolutely. Yes.
Yeah, just to echo what David was saying earlier. I think, talking about ordinances and the comprehensive plan, I'm afraid in some specific areas, it's a two-way street for that examination. So the comprehensive plan covers a lot more ground in many ways than the ordinances stuff do. And in some cases, a lack of agreement between the two is seriously problematic, cause a lot of trouble. And it may be in those cases that if the comprehensive plan appears to be sound, then some ordinance revisions or additions to modifications, pretty strategic, pretty surgical, ones may need to be made. And then there is the other side of the thing. You'll have a few situations where the ordinance says something and just not consistent with the comprehensive plan, and the better idea is maybe a movement of the comprehensive plan. But I think we've got to be open to that, especially given, as you say, the somewhat big, possibly, strategically so, vague treatment that it's given in the strategic plan here, so.
Yeah, I hadn't thought about something you just said. I was thinking of it more from David's perspective in that something we're putting in a comprehensive plan, if it's in conflict with the ordinance, then the ordinance needs to change. You're speaking to some things that might be in the ordinance that the comprehensive plan should address.
Could be. No, I don't think we want to rule out either direction here until we.
I think our role is just to point out that misalignment and that it needs to be addressed.
Yeah, and I think we can get that done by April. I don't know if we can go that deep. Not in April, not by April.
Unless we all wanna meet.
We're gonna have twice a week meetings now.
Bosses, if you have a wrong, say, it's been nice, no, kid.
Good points, all good points. So, did you find some of your stuff? You wanna go ahead?
Yeah, I've got two things I'm working on. What Jamie was talking about was just sort of some ideas that I've been working on that I shared with him about things like farm to table. So that probably is stuff I'll bring up in the discussion, but I also started looking at the final strategic plan now that we have it. So I was kind of canvassing my notes here for things that were useful to the group. And since we're starting with the economic development, page 3 is strategic priority number 1. I thought for strategy number 1, which is balanced funding framework, it's the 85-15 tax split. It's what we all decided to start with as a group, and that's what the subcommittee's working on. So I actually think from that standpoint, this group is really trying to create a financial model for that 85-15 tax split. So that's, that's good news for the strategic plan and for the board and for us if we all kind of figure out what that is. And then where it says increased fund balance, I kind of read that a couple of times and I didn't see anything in there about spending. It was all about generating revenue, but I didn't see anything in the board's strategic plan about controlling spending. So I made a note on that, just saying it lacks a commitment to reducing or controlling spending. So I don't know that that's our place, but just in making comments on the strategic plan, that was surprising because that's always been kind of a important thing in Palatine, to balance the book, so to speak. And then under economic prosperity, which is strategic priority number 2 on the next page, my note is about infrastructure. I brought this up at the subcommittee meeting, and it does tie into the spending side of things that when you say strategic land development, you should also be looking at the costs of infrastructure, and also things like water security, which we just saw in Richmond, we making sure that we have water security for our businesses, and just keeping that, environmental resources such as, groundwater in mind, and then also the cost of infrastructure and the cost of maintaining infrastructure. And that is something that in the past, the county has invested heavily in water and sewer, and we really don't, it doesn't pay for itself. So we just need to, be aware of that if we're, making any comments about infrastructure, it has a long-term operational cost too. And keep that in mind, because we're generating revenue through higher assessments, but whether it's transportation or infrastructure, it's not sustainable, then it's going to eventually bite us in the butt. So that was my only note on that strategic priority. I don't know if anyone has any other thoughts on the whole infrastructure spending side of things. If I'm way off base, let me know.
So,
I think the fund balance conversation is, and they talked in one of the other documents about improving their their bond rating.
right.
When we met in front of S&P and Moody's to get the AA bond rating, it's interesting to listen to the people who were judging us. And we've kind of left there and told later that with the size of our locality, that you're never going to get AAA bond rating. So
Right.
my thing was, you can keep working to do that. You get a bigger budget and all the other things that come with that rating. I don't know why to me, if your fund balance is what they're talking about, maintain your fund balance, but, do some things with to Don's point, what are you doing with your overflow? If you want to call it that, or if you're trying to raise that 22% of whatever the ratio was, why would you raise it? If you maintain your good AA bond rating, I don't know.
So, and I was, from a personal perspective, I agree with both of you, but I don't think it's this group, for the fund balance part, I don't think it's this group's responsibility. That's why I would say, sounds like a great public comment period, let's talk, you know, from whoever it wants to come from, but I don't think that's this group's. In other words, it's in the strategic plan, but that's not specifically what we were tasked with from the fund balance perspective. From the infrastructure, and even transportation side, I think we do have some, that there has to be a thought pattern that, you know, what we're talking about doesn't completely crush that. But speaking to the expense, and I mean, I think you're well aware, I mean, the reason that it costs us money now is because we don't have enough users. So the plan is that in other words, I agree with you, we don't want to go pick some big industrial site that's a half a mile from where we already have infrastructure. But if what we come up with is within the places or attainable within the places, you know, maybe cross sections under 60, there are places that hasn't happened yet. You work with the developer on their connection fees and work out, you know, deals there so that you can get it to both sides of 60. But if you're staying within our already existing infrastructure layout, which is, we do have that in a GIS overlay, and you've already gotten that in, right? Yeah. You see what I'm saying? We can, so I agree with you, it needs to be in the thought pattern, not to necessarily go expanding that 100 miles. But, I mean, really, we have paid for infrastructure, it's in the ground that we're not being
I think
used.
Don brought it up in our work group that we had on Thursday. You know, he had done some work over the weekend.
Yeah.
And sent it out, and it had a paragraph or so of the challenges with some parcels towards infrastructure, both from a transportation perspective and possible water sewer and other things. They had some minor recommendations in there. I don't think we should know, whatever map appetite we have, we shouldn't say that we fully understand that some of these projects or some of these parcels will create things that need to be addressed from infrastructure needs, because we're all smart enough to know in this room it will.
Right.
You know, and with business comes traffic, with residents comes traffic, and that's a whole conversation in itself. So I don't want to ever, I wouldn't think, I'm not gonna say, so I would hope that we as a group, when we deliver whatever we're delivering, we say, we did not spend hours talking about what needs to happen from the water line to this project to this
Right.
project, you know.
But know that they need to be
They
addressed.
need to be addressed.
That's kind of where I'm coming
So
from.
the other way to look at that is that we've already invested in the water and sewer infrastructure, and including the 2 wastewater plants. And they've been there for a while. And so now, you know, it's a problem getting enough flow to them to actually take advantage of them. So maybe we, you know, at that time, we thought investing in infrastructure was going to lead to all this economic development. So maybe that didn't go quite as quickly as people were hoping. So now, when we talk about expanding service areas or things like that, like maybe we should look at, from a future land use planning standpoint, areas that are within the existing service areas. You know, making sure that, and also if we really feel like we need light industrial or, you know, commercial tax base, like not necessarily focusing on hookups of residential to the water and sewer system, because it was originally built for commercial. So I'm not saying it's wrong to hook up residential, I'm just saying, you know, keep in mind that we have a limited resource. Like, for example, in the courthouse area, everything is, the Aqua Virginia system is completely, or Aqua America, Aqua America now, it's completely off of well water. So at some point, there's not going to be enough well water. So, you know, instead of, you know, making decisions that sacrifice, you know, the type of development that we're looking for on the 85-15 tax split, just keeping that in mind that it's a limited resource, or that we need a backup plan. So, you know, I don't think these are going to be the main things that the board wanted this group to look at, but there's no reason not to talk about it, because I think it makes the message clearer and it answers questions in a, say, a public meeting, like Jamie said, where he says, well, we'll talk about that at the public meeting. I mean, there's no harm in talking about it. It's stuff we know something about and we can inform the plan with.
You know, I initially read the comp plan several months ago, and yesterday, I lost cable over the weekend. So I sat down and reread the comp plan. The comp plan has a lot of grandiose ideas. we have to figure out, to your point, Don, why didn't these plans come to fruition? Okay, I think that's part of our job. Why didn't these plans work out? Some of the plans that they wanted to do right away, or the 6-year plan, whatever. So that's part of our job. Strategic priority, economic prosperity. We can't have prosperity if we have departments working against bringing companies into this county, in my opinion only. Departments bringing companies into this county and throwing out all kinds of roadblocks and hurdles to keep people out, companies out. We have to streamline, we have to make things easier to bring companies in, to bring people in, and in my opinion, to have economic prosperity. We make it very difficult. We don't work with people. No, we can't have people running roughshod. We got to have people do it right by state code. But we can't throw extra things at them. Something else. I've noticed housing and residential. When I was reading over that, there's a lot of places that they can go. The comp plan strategic priority talks about that, all kinds of different housing. People talk about, oh, we gotta add workforce housing. It talks about that. It talks about that. That's not anything new. That's not something that we have to necessarily concentrate on, we just have to reiterate it. We just have to look if that's something we want to prioritize later on. That's just something we have to look for.
I had a few other comments on the executive summary, but basically there's 6 parts of the plan. I think the financial stability and economic prosperity parts go together, and then the housing and residential options, quality of life and public safety, and workforce and enhancing government observations, they kind of go together. There's 3 sections on that. I feel like that's a whole nother discussion. I haven't reviewed those completely yet because I thought, I think the Citizens Working Group is kind of focusing on the 85-15 and the economics first. So I keep saying, let's do one thing right, and then let's do the other thing, because they gave us 2 things to do. I know we can't do that forever, but for my brain, it's easier to focus on 1 and 2 before we do 3, 4, and 5. And then I made a note under 6, which is rural heritage and resource preservation, and there's nothing in the executive summary, at least, I need to read it more closely, but there's nothing in there about existing neighborhoods. It does talk about rural living and natural resources and all these great things that I believe in, but it's also not really talking about the existing citizens and adjacencies, which I think a good comp plan is going to take into account, the existing citizens of the county first before, the developers that are trying to come to the county. It also says excellence and community engagement in the first sentence of the executive summary, so I think that's something that would be really good. Like, if we're really gonna do a recommendation on a comp plan amendment, it would be great if there was great community engagement in it. I think I said that at the first meeting. The meetings are live. I've told anyone who's listening to call me or email me, and I do get emails. It's not that many, but I do get some. I'm sure everybody else does too. I think if there's support for this, then, this is going to be a whole lot more effective going forward after we finish our meetings in April.
Mr. Chairman, I guess, to Don's point, I wanted to, I kind of took the calendar we had and said, okay, how can we get our deliverable, get the chapter closed for the most part on economic development? And then, so, and then kind of jumping dive in feet first to housing. And, cause we technically, calendar is somewhere in my clipboard. Right over here somewhere.
5 more meetings.
That's what you're looking for? Yeah,
That's it.
Well, I
That's
kind
it.
of,
We got 1 more this month, 2 in March, and 1 and a possible in April.
so we had,
I'm counting the possible
we
as
got
that.
the 18th, the
We had put a
18th,
possible on there originally for,
Oh, the second.
we had
Yeah,
the
the
4th,
second
the
April one,
1st,
so.
and then this, second one, well, we scratched the 1st and made it the second. And then with the 8th, I wrote on mine.
So that would be the first one of April.
right, and then that leaves 1 week left between that and, or a week and a half between that and the board meeting if we needed one.
If we wanted the 15th.
That's right.
That was more just to clean it up to.
That's right.
The package, so the package that needs to be before the.
So if you kind of back into, we should close the chapter, pretty much close the chapter in my eyes, by the 18th, maybe halfway through the meeting, and then dive in the back half of that meeting into the,
Maybe I'm just optimistic. I hope that, I was hoping that the economic side was bringing us something today
well, we have,
that we could hear emotion.
we'll let Don,
on.
we're gonna let,
Right, that's the
Yeah,
next
buddy over here.
topic. So I was
He's gonna
hoping the end of
bring
this
it-
meeting.
I will tell
might
you, we
have
worked our asses off, man. Don't think we sat around and did nothing.
I know
But
you
we
did.
we need one more meeting to
Okay.
kind of finish the rest of the county. And I'm, so I kind of said, okay, next week, the 11th, whatever day we choose, we got to get that ready to be closed. And I was saying, maybe we take the first half of the meeting on the 18th, finalize it all. And then
Yeah.
maybe the back half of the 18th meeting introduces house.
Start on how.
We are meeting next week.
Yeah.
On the 11th, so that we're ready
Okay.
for the 18th, but we didn't get through it.
And I guess to pile on a little bit, I think as a group, if we're doing reading or delving into not watching cable, satellite TV if you don't have it, and you're reading, if you get things on housing, because there's a ton of stuff out there now, a lot of studies being done, a lot of dialogue from the state level to the local level, some localities are doing some things. Please don't hold it to yourself, share it with, I guess, Ligon, who can then forward it to the group. Because there's tons of stuff, and I'm gonna talk to the Plan RVA people now. Y'all have a ton of stuff on housing. Please, if you could provide that to Ligon so we all can do homework or reading or digesting. Not that we're gonna agree on it all, but it's a lot of dialogue going on at every level, the state to other localities.
Yeah.
You know, I don't watch much TV because there's not much on TV to really watch, unless I stream the History Channel sometime. But that even, I went on YouTube and looked at Henrico County's public announcement they did when they created their land trust, just to pick up tidbits and dialogue. It's 15 minutes long. You know, the county manager, John Vitokas, comes out and he makes an announcement, then the chairman of the board does, and a gentleman from housing was on there. There was some good tidbits in there, you know. So it was a 15-minute, listen to, not say it's right or wrong. The interesting thing was their land trust, there were 5 land trusts in it, and I'm not saying we need a land trust or not. Please don't, everybody fly off the handle if they're listening to the public and think that's the solution or not the solution. But there's 5 land trusts in the state of Virginia. Maggie Walker being the biggest, and Charlottesville has one, Lynchburg has one, the Roanoke area has one, and there's one other somewhere. They had $80 million of projects in them. Henrico put $60 million in there, which is 80% of what had been done all the years with these other land trusts. I was like, wow, that's a bold statement from Henrico's standpoint to the seriousness of it. And so whether that's a solution or not, I don't know. But, those type of things I think we should share with each other so that we at least have a chance to digest and understand, because the term affordability, just as we know, rural means different things to people, affordability means different things, but, I just want all the data that I can digest if I'm gonna try to help make an informed decision that maybe helps bring about change or goals to this document that board gave us. So, and do you have any comments, I guess? I'm sorry, Amy, but she's nodding her head.
Okay. No, just wanted to speak. So a couple things. Again, I don't want to step out of school, but I do happen to know that the Board of Partnership for Housing Affordability will be considering the nomination for you to serve as the county's rep on that board of directors at next Thursday's meeting. So I will just share that every county, city, and town in the Richmond region have a seat available to them for participation in the board of directors for Partnership for Housing Affordability. That's the nonprofit that you were referring to that's administering Henrico County's trust fund program for ownership. And so that seat for Powhatan County was last filled by Allison Oliver. She's here on staff, and so that'll be moving forward. The staff at my organization, Plan RDA, have been working to kind of create somewhat of a toolkit. It's by no means a promise to be comprehensive of all of the options out there, but the place to start, kind of, I think, is, as you're indicating, that it'd be nice to be able to have just a set of resources to look at about what's working in our region, what's working in our state, maybe some other out-of-state best practices. So we can definitely get with your team to get maybe a preview of that, and it'll be a good beta test for us to see whether it's useful. And then just going back to the conversation that you all were having earlier about the Habitat for Humanity-led effort, we also were contacted by Susan Winecki to be able to have a role in that steering committee, and so we're going to be connecting to that. I think I mentioned at a previous committee meeting that we're working on, and just waiting for, frankly, the announcement to come from the governor's office and a grant that we've applied for to do a housing market analysis that would include Powhatan County. And so between the study that's happening with Habitat and then also the market value analysis that we're working on, the part that worries me is the timeline that you all are operating on and our ability to collect all this data.
You don't have that yet?
But I mean, I can definitely get with Sarah Namakari on our team, and I think Roxanne, I've already shared with you the demo site that we have for the housing demo that we've already compiled. So I can keep working with you guys to make sure that the material's out there. But that's just 3 thoughts that kind of pop into my head as I was listening to you talk.
Thank you.
One quick, I promise, Tom. If you are aware of any state legislation, bills or anything that are now currently having dialogue, can you at least clue us in? Because to me,
Yeah,
I hear all kind of
sure.
some horror stories, if you want to call them those, or just that could possibly come down to mandate or, you know, I was on the.
It all got left on the table.
Yeah, that I was aware of, they all died at
Yeah,
crossover.
I was just needing a
Okay,
the
perfect. I'll sleep better tonight.
There was a lot of them.
Yeah,
And,
it was.
and I'll just get, so I'm on one of those committees with the affordable housing, from an assessor standpoint. And there was one good bill that has made it through crossover that deals with, the federally mandated ones, which we have none of in Powhatan currently, but somehow I got on, pointed to that board and was working with the delegate out of Charlottesville to clean that up. So that,
Well, good, thank you
Yeah.
for the update, good.
Yes.
Just some, one more comment on the 2 tasks, if you will, we'll put them in those 2 categories. And I totally agree that, the economic development is probably coming along pretty well, and you judge that today. And, it's a pretty doable thing, and I think in the near future, maybe we'll get there. The housing one is somewhat at this stage more amorphous, open-ended. And I think we dive into it and do the best we can getting into it, and things are going to arise that need to be addressed. And I think the last thing in the world we want to do is to leave the impression with the citizenry that we are rushing this, or that we're not getting the job done properly. And, I think that's a big mistake. We got to remember that they are major in this picture here. So if that means that part of what we give to the board falls later than that date, then that falls later than that date. And, the board didn't exactly help us get moving quickly here, as we well know. But I mean, to be artificially constrained in an area that is potentially this important to the citizens, I think we just need to go a little slow as needed, make sure we're doing it right.
I would add, though, I think it would be good for us to report out to the board in April on economic development.
oh, absolutely.
Because they set that arbitrary deadline, we'll certainly,
And-
we're talking about jumping into housing March 4th, so we could certainly be ready for an April board meeting.
If we get to the second March meeting and feel like it, I mean, we can always submit something to them. Because our March 2nd meeting is before their board meeting, so we can just submit some writing that says we need more time.
The key is do that right.
Exactly.
Just a little working group support so that what we're telling them is really useful as opposed to, hey, we got to move on and we're rushed.
Yes.
We're all thinking, I think everyone's thinking, I don't know if anybody else wants to go about it differently.
I don't think we get in a rush. I think we, yeah.
With all these overlapping studies too, it's hard to say finish when there's other things being studied. Like, it is good to think that through when we do start talking more specifically about housing, because they're going to inform the results.
I don't disagree, but I do hate when we, in government, wait for a study because there's always a study. So I don't disagree because there are some important ones going on right now, but to Mr. Donati's point, when we wait for a study of a study of a study, nothing gets done. So I'm not disagreeing that there are some very important ones that I think affect what we're doing right now, but.
We're going to meet 3 times and we're going to focus on
Right.
And we're going to come up with something.
Something.
Most of us worked in the government, in the public sector, or private sector, excuse me. So we understand deliverables usually happen quicker in the private sector than they do.
Absolutely.
So.
All right, any other comments on the strategic plan? Ready to move on? Reporting in from our economic development chapter subcommittee.
Let's see, so in terms of the current map, you want to give me any preliminary remarks, Roxanne, before we dive into this?
Sure. So we did make it all the way from the east. We started on the eastern Chesterfield border on 60. We did make it all the way down to, was that
Jude's Ferry.
Jude's Ferry? Yeah, so we made a pretty good progress there. In the 2 hours that we met and worked really hard, we did change. We pretty much kept everything that was already identified as economic opportunity priority. We did move some into priority that were not in there before. So we did 8 more properties we added to economic priority, and removed one went into there from Gateway. What, do you have them in a different color than the other ones, Bob?
Yeah, well, if we look over here, so on the map at the moment, of course, you see Route 60 in blue. Here's the eastern edge of the county, of course, right there on the right-hand side.
Right.
And the proposed economic priority, I-1 really, areas that the subcommittee has looked at and especially putting on the table today are the ones that are in gold. They're in gold. And the gateway parcels outside of those are still kind of shaded purple here, although you can see, focus in on them, you can see the underlying landscape, if needed. And the minor arterials, the rural connectors are all shown from the thoroughfare plan. And right now we've got the layer on there just to keep in mind what's in and around nearby, which is important in these things. What the current residential picture is. Once again, just to reiterate, the yellow parcels are RU, and the red parcels are R2, and these blue parcels on up out of that zone are R5. Right, so that's, these are existing in most
Yellow
cases.
being greenish yellow.
Yeah, greenish yellow, I'm gonna run my cursor around as an example. That right there, wherever you see that on the map, that's RU, which of course has lot sizes down to basically an acre or lower, less than an acre, in some cases. Yeah. And again, these were most all of these have been, in fact, all of these, that you see there are older. They came into the county well ahead of the Twin DEMCOG plan. In fact, most of them came in the 80s, in the 90s, and even in some cases earlier than that. 70s. But there hadn't been, generalized R5, R2, or RU zoning designations, and projects like this, certainly since probably the early 2000s would have been the last one. So that's some orientation.
So on the commercial side, there was gateway business and economic opportunity, and the idea that this committee is talking about is adding a land use designation, economic priority.
Yes.
And that would be more specifically for light industrial. That would be the goal or the strategy for doing that, is to be really clear that we want light industrial, and that's what the really bright yellow parcels are. So that's the crux of the work that we did last week. Sorry, Roxanne.
So, real quick, does that mean that economic priority is restricted from things that are in gateway business? Like you
Correct.
wouldn't be putting the gas station.
Correct.
She's-
Right,
Okay.
no fast food, drive-through, none of that.
Right.
It's strictly things that are in that light industrial usage that we have currently right now.
It's not a new zoning district,
But,
No.
so,
zoning classification.
right,
But
right.
does gateway business, we talked about this a little bit, gateway business has the ability to get both, right?
Correct, which is what we talked about in the subcommittee, is potentially asking for light industrial to be removed from gateway. And gateway would then be CC, I'm looking at looking to make sure I'm correct. VCPD, CCPD, of course, and that's it. But we would take light industrial out and say, light industrial, we really want to go in these yellow parcels, which is economic priority that we've identified. But that, in only light industrial, not heavy. We've got space for heavy. But there are, so in CC Commerce Center, there are still a lot of light industrial uses in there. They're very minor. If you're truly a warehouse or something of that nature, you would step up to light industrial. But there's still some in there. There's how many, 68 uses in CC?
Oh, yeah.
It's quite a few.
82.
Yeah, so.
So that's more of a zoning code issue.
Right.
Permitted uses, whereas from the standpoint of the gateway business land use designation, we could tone down or take out some of the light industrial focus, or if that's not something that this group or the board wants to do, it would just figure into, say, the zoning application, where now you have economic priority, or as we like to call it, EP, or you have gateway business, which has all these retail uses. So you'll see the purple, you'll see some adjacent stores and gas stations around what's still purple. You'll see some of the lots are smaller. You'll see there's, definitely good proximity to access to Route 60. And then you'll see some yellow that maybe is larger tracts of land, maybe it's a little more set back, maybe it has adjacent industrial. So by creating that, even if there is some overlap in the future land use plan, it doesn't necessarily mean gateway business is the place to do light industrial. When Roxanne or any is looking at it with someone, she's like, hey, I've got, a future land use plan that shows economic priority. And then we kind of, define what that means. What does economic priority mean?
And the board can go in, as this board that adopted this plan, in gateway business when it was first done several years back, housing was part of that. If you look at the pictures of gateway business, that had housing options in it. The board that adopted this plan chose to take out housing as an opportunity in gateway business, just as you're describing. If gateway business, this board wants to take light manufacturing, that's their choice as something they don't want to encourage. I think the goal, back to what Don is talking about, is trying to create some clarity so that it's a focus when somebody reaches out to their economic development director and says, I want to put a light manufacturing facility on 60 acres.
What do we got?
What do you got?
Right.
And she's not gonna go, well, I've got a 60-acre piece of business, and I don't know if that would fit or not, because the public would not understand that that's there, whatever. So I think it's trying to create the clarity, as much as anything. And if that eases people's uncomfortableness, I think it's wonderful, but.
Well, I think we, and as we go along here and certainly down the road, and at the time it comes to make the recommendation on the economic development side, I think it's incumbent on us to help the public understand why there is an interest in the light industrial category and what that actually means. So part and parcel of that, I mean, is certainly the BPP, the long-term BPP picture out of the I-1 is a richer thing that develops over time. The job quality in the I-1 is very different. In terms of people that might be certainly technical school educated or college educated, want to find a job, this is much more likely where they're going to have an opportunity to find it, which is part of what we're very interested in. Those are two things. The other thing is that by its structure, I-1 in general is not going to be dependent on local traffic in the same way that a lot of the commercial properties, along Route 60 would be, which means you have the opportunity when bringing in I-1 and trying to discuss the setup of it to leave screened area between the roadway and where the I-1 sits, which, is an example that came up several times in the course of the subcommittee discussion was, the classic granite marble case. It's when you drive into the county and as you pass that site, it doesn't jump out to you as, oh, here's another, stuck right up against the road, another one of these. And it doesn't look much different from Chesterfield to me at this point. But and the reason, of course, is because they've left a band of mature, older forest there that screens, what's going on behind there. And that opportunity exists, especially if you're kind of directing people into I-1 and saying, this is what we're after, and we're trying to get something that folks can be much more comfortable with, as an alternative to what you can find in this general commercial. So those are things that are in there. And I don't think that's information that's widely thought about in the citizenry. We can help them with it, and I think that's an important part of the picture.
I think something we need to look at is, and it's a little hard to see on your map, is places like Oak Ridge are, like you said, off the beaten path. No one looks at them, no one sees them, but in fact, when you start actually going in there, the capital investment in the buildings, the workforce that is there, the revenue, which I can't speak to every single one of them's revenue, but collectively, that is a very good revenue spot for us. But it is all grouped together, it is unseen and untouched, and it just sits back there churning money for the county. So we want more of that.
And because we have that, you'll see a lot of the yellow adjacent to Oak Ridge. And so the idea behind that is internal circulation roads. So it may not exactly work with exactly what people have built in that park, but for the most part, you can envision pretty easily interconnected parcels without additional entrances onto Anderson or Route 60 from every single piece of land in there. A good example is the yellow blob near the cul-de-sac where Bob's got his cursor.
Yeah.
I mean, it's about touching Oak Ridge, the interior circulation road there, but it was not previously identified as any sort of gateway business. It's 43C32R, I think I'm looking at it right.
Down here.
Yeah, that one. That was not considered gateway business in the future land use map, but it's like sitting right on that road next to other light industrial uses. So there were some pretty easy, or maybe it was 4277A, but there's some that are right there, are obviously well suited to light industrial, and that's been a really good success for the county for light industrial. Yeah, so those were the easy ones. Yeah.
And we discussed certain ones, like for instance, if you go back up higher, Bob.
Want me to leave
Leave the yellow one.
Yeah, put the yellow back on, please.
Okay.
And then kind of zoom out a little bit. We made discussions on like the big parcel, 4362. It's outside of that 2,000 foot band. But as we are looking at projects recently approved, like the data center, for instance, and we have those 4361, 64E, and 64 have already been rezoned to light industrial, you might as well look at that property as well and say, does it could it be an additional light industrial piece that has a complementary use next to it?
It's big too. How big is that parcel?
64
60.
acres.
So you're in that, that scenario that Billy mentioned of 50+ acres. What do you got for me? I mean, if you want to do a 50-acre
Okay.
industrial with a lake on the property line, that's the parcel. That's one of the opportunities.
Yep.
And then I think we also discussed 4279.
Yep.
Down a little bit over to your west. And there was some conversation about, does that end up being a residential, potential residential property? It was considered for that years ago, but the way,
back east.
Holly Hills.
Oh,
all right,
There you go, right there.
that piece, 79, with the accompanying pieces around it. Because it's right next to Holly Hills, I think we have good control as a large parcel. The county has good control to have setbacks if it becomes industrial, so that we can kind of guard the people in Holly Hills and all of those, probably 200 homes there or something like that.
That's 75 acres almost.
Yes, and it's 75 acres and it's abutting Oak Bridge, so it kind of just makes sense to increase that over with those other properties.
It's currently zone C.
It's a split zone C and a residential, so, yeah. Another property, we had a conversation.
Just another comment on that.
Yeah.
That may be part of the discussion about housing.
It could be.
That's part of why we wanted to put a pin in it for further discussion. I mean, we don't have to stop talking about economic development when we start talking about housing. This is just a large tract of land that's near Oak Bridge, but it's also near Holly Hills. And there's a house of worship there. I think it's called Church of Christ or something. And it's like east of that is closer to the industrial park and west of that is closer to Holly Hills. So, I'm interested in people looking at that.
I think it's worth a discussion on both sides. For an economic development standpoint, I like it because of size and proximity to the eastern side of the county and the highway. But it has merits on both sides for discussion, certainly.
And you'll notice, following along where Don, I think it's Don is what he's suggesting. That is a parcel that, again, you've got, right now it's pretty much completely wooded, either in hardwood or there's the kind picture over here. So the opportunity to provide buffer for Holly Hills, as a buffer from Route 60
It's there already.
is there.
And to walk to work.
Yeah, well.
And Doug Bradbury probably remember that Roger, the work that we've done, when you leave mature trees, you get credits for buffering.
Right.
If the trees are saved on the parcel, you get so many credits back and you can defer your costs, because to put it in buffering, the standards that are now in place are pretty expensive to replant and buffer to create, to Bob's point, to cover it up, if you want to use that term. But if you leave the vegetated trees, you get a lot of credits.
From Ligon's perspective, I imagine we prefer hardwoods that are existing versus chopping them down and replanting them and then you.
Yeah, that's what we're trying to do in every.
And
Church, well, you have to remember that.
versus landscapes.
Topo, he's right, topo's important too.
Both industrial sites more like that.
So if we go west a little bit, there's the 4263, you just had your marker on it. Discussion on that, we didn't have a huge amount of discussion on it, correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, fair amount, but,
It's kind of a split because the back is near large lot residential. You can kind of see that, the back of the parcel, but then the front of the parcel has gateway business on both sides. And it makes for a pretty good location for light industrial in the front side of the parcel.
And I think we discussed the fact that Stave Mill intersection as it is pretty built out on a more general commercial level, and that may not be in favor of most people in the county to have more and more of that.
Yep.
So a light industrial kind of abutting behind that would be a nice addition if we go that direction.
That is a lot of gateway business from basically, you're looking at Walmart up left and all the way down to kind of the old Byerly auto dealership, I would say. It's
There's
driving it and looking at it. It's
There are a lot of
big
potential.
amount of gateway business in there, so that the yellow's in the middle. It gives us a focus on light industrial for that large tract.
correct. And then the pieces north of there, like where 4226 is, and the piece that kind of cuts across Carter Gallier, are just kind of adding light industrial around where heavy industrial already exists. And also that road there's some plans in the future to have that road connect to other Carter Gallier, some, who knows when in the future. So why not add some light industrial where we're gonna have essentially an industrial connector road?
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, it's usually, referring to that dashed area, that dash line that connects the piece of Carter
correct.
Gallier, and it's, which is in the thoroughfare plan.
And that is the only, I think it's the only new road in the thoroughfare plan
It is.
for the county right now in the comp plan. So it's very unique to the county's future land use plan that we actually can do light and heavy industrial on both sides of Carter Gallier without having to come out onto Route 60 and join the commuter traffic. It's got its own little road. You could drive from the high school to the Walmart and stop at the Burger King and the Taco Bell for lunch. I mean, it's all interconnected.
Or you could drive from Colony Construction to Luckstone without ever getting on 60, which is the idea.
Keeps the trucks off.
So
Keeps
it's
the
called
trucks off.
Colony Construction, that's over there.
The 142E110 is Colony Construction site, and then, yeah, getting back over to Luckstone is the idea. Because that is their main traffic back and forth.
I don't know if anyone knows the plan that Thomas Jefferson PDC put together in Charlottesville called Places 29, but I started looking at it last night, and it wasn't exactly what we're talking about, but the general, I remember when the plan was developed 20 years ago, the congestion on 29 north of Charlottesville was like out of this world bad, and they realized they could not accommodate all of the cars going north out of Charlottesville on one roadway. So they have done separated grade interchanges and hundreds of millions of dollars in construction work, but they also did Places 29, which was to kind of clean up pedestrian mobility on Hillsdale Drive and on Berkmar Drive, and just create these north-south roadways. And the cool thing, if you ever want to check it out, is you can go up there and it'll be like bumper-to-bumper cars on 29 from traffic light to traffic light. And you go a quarter mile over to the bank and get on Berkmar, and you could go a mile with 2 roundabouts, no traffic lights and no traffic, and just pop into the Walmart, and then pop back out and go back down a mile, and there's no cars, because it's a little 2-lane road with bike lanes. So it's really pretty cool. I mean, you could see so many cars trying to go north, and nobody knows that road is there. And, so it's really, Carter Gallier kind of reminded me of that it would be for the local people that work in that area, that they can like pop in and out of places and not have to go sit in traffic lights on Route 60 where you have to do progression, because there's 10,000 cars, you gotta have lights and they gotta turn green at the same time. It's hard to move that many cars, but these little parallel roadways are really great ways to kind of slip in and out of things, businesses, and go about your day. So,
I think as much traffic that can be alleviated off of 60 is a plus.
it's a big deal. I think it's a big deal. Yeah. So from a land use standpoint, that's all basically industrial, and then you see the Walmart's gateway business, and then you get over to the Food Lion's gateway business. But most of that stuff's been rezoned, right? Even though it was gateway business, it's all rezoned light industrial or I2 now.
Which ones?
But everything behind the Food Lion.
Yes,
It's 42.
it's all light industrial.
One,
Yeah.
and all the.
It's either light industrial or it moves into heavy industrial.
So that could actually be a really nice 85-15 area. There's a lot still available over there for continued growth.
So we also added, so for 42-7, the reason that we identified that one is because in the current comp plan, the back of it is industrial, which could be I1 or I2, light or heavy, and then the front is gateway. Which currently, I think Lincoln's got a planning commission meeting tonight where it is on the agenda to be rezoned to light industrial, so may be a little bit much to put in here now, but this might be different by a couple months from now. But it's worth identifying that one as a light industrial piece versus heavier gateway.
So for the exercise, anything that we added, if you remember, those acreage were calculated at $432 and $153, whatever it was, per acre. So anything was added went to, anything we took off went out, and then we haven't even seen what the effect of what that was done to the proposed mix. Now, we did have dialogue, about should we be fixated on it, oh my gosh, we just did, and it equals 80-20 now, and we gotta pull parcels out.
No.
And we said, no, we don't think we should be hung up on that. Because some of the parcels we know are gonna be long-term, for instance, the Adcock property, which is a large chunk of property. We've got that in possible future. It's got a 30-year lease on it, I think, with a solar farm. So you know it's not gonna happen in 30 years, so we don't wanna get fixated on, we gotta be on the 85-15. We don't need to encourage 80-20 or whatever it is. So I guess when we finish the exercise, we'll kick it and he'll pull it into spreadsheet.
No, it's already done.
You updated what we updated, okay, so we know, based upon what we did the other day, I have a number here, Steve.
We
Yeah,
did,
that's exactly right.
we did find at least one parcel that was not on 60, and it had low-density residential on 3 sides, but it was designated as gateway business. So in the case where we ran across the gateway business parcel that maybe wasn't the best future land use plan decision, that, potentially could be taken out, but it's nowhere near the amount we added in with the economic prosperity or priority. That was the focus, and we wouldn't be taking those out because we overshot the mark. Like Billy said, we would be, for me personally, I hope we get a chance to take a little closer look at gateway business in the next few weeks, just to make sure that that's the right amount, because we don't need like 80 fast food restaurants or car washes. Like, they should be the right parcels, they should fit the future land use plan. And we might find some others that are surrounded by residential with not really good access to Route 60 or even looking off 7-Eleven. So that's probably after this exercise, because this is the exercise that we identified as the key to economic success. So that's the one we're focused on first.
How far to the west do you take this study?
Well, we've already got.
We're going all the way to 522, back to your point.
We haven't made it there.
We haven't got there yet.
We tried.
Well, we got preliminary. Yeah.
We've got preliminary parcels, and what we were doing, we were instructed to do was roll your sleeves up and come up with challenges or things you wanted to possibly have discussion about adding or subtracting or whatever. So
Yeah, there are quite a few additional ones that are in gold.
I don't think we'll have the number of
We hadn't had a
additions
chance to talk about it at the subcommittee.
or changes we had in the east because of the intensity of water, sewer, et cetera, that. But you still will have some, in my thoughts, is I think we'll have some changes based upon some good dialogue, and then hopefully we can come present back to you guys at the quick meeting and say, okay, yep, I see where you're going, nope, I don't like that one, I'll take it out, and the majority says take it out, we'll take it out, add it in.
The eastern part of the county has the Dutoy wastewater treatment plant, which has a lot more capacity than the courthouse or Flanny Creek one. And then, it also has the water from Chesterfield on a 50-year lease agreement, which is piped water from the Swift Creek Reservoir through the Chesterfield water treatment plant, whereas our water is in the courthouse, the water is groundwater, through aquifer recovery. It's very different, the two districts. That's all we have, other than the prisons. That's all we have for water and sewer.
And, as we go through the planning here, and certainly this is an important focal point at the subcommittee level. I think, it's very important to get across to folks and to the citizens and all the interested, stakeholders here, that this is a long-term picture, 85-15. It's not happening tomorrow, it's not happening in a year, it's not happening in 5 years, it's gonna be longer before you ever get to that. But you gotta plan ahead for that, if that's where you're trying to go.
A way for it to happen.
And you don't wanna just have a knee jerk and grab up some little thing that then displaces what you'd hope to be able to achieve by making available these options. And so that's an important thing to understand. And I think that the charge, as I read it, coming from the Board of Supervisors here, is to be able to say, at the next go-round of this, we made progress toward the 85-15, and I think we could definitely do that. It's a different thing than to say you'll be at 85-15 in just few number of years, that's not.
One of the things that I think. needs
Unless
to
you
be
want to
said-
hire a giant staff to turn
Yeah.
over to Roxanne. to Roxanne.
One of the things that needs to be said, especially if anybody from the public's listening, if you see a parcel here and your neighbor's that parcel, don't run over and knock on the door and tell them they just got rezoned. Because they didn't get rezoned, and that doesn't mean that they have to do economic priority, whatever we wanna call it, EP. That's just what the county is, we're making, we would make a suggestion, so please, I don't want anybody to go, oh my God, I just got, named economic priority and my property just went up to $432,000 an acre, I'm rich.
And economic priority isn't even in the comp plan yet. So if we recommend this, it still has to be.
It still has to go through public
It still has to
hearings
go
and
through
step-
the public process,
Yeah.
it still has to be described, but the underlying idea is that it's gonna give the county a tool to encourage light industrial, which brings jobs. That's essentially the idea of the ADP zone, is to focus on that specific goal in the strategic plan.
Yeah, and I mean, Billy's point is really important to get across, that, nobody, if you're a property owner, nobody is changing your zoning. You as the owner have to request it. If you don't request it and you don't want this change to take place, and you don't want to go in that direction, at least not in your lifetime, or until you're ready to change hands, or whatever it is, that's your decision. That's not the county's decision. We're making an option here for where it could go if you were amenable to this. But we're not in any position.
And keep in mind, when we say 453,000, whatever it is, that's taking the buildings as they're there,
Built out.
it averages, it. So raw land is not that, it's taking, and back to somebody who likes numbers, just for the group to quantify if that was a fair number, but to me, one of the creme de la cremes in the county from an economic standpoint would be classic granite and marble. The building and the land there is now, for tax purposes, worth $11 million. Okay? So you divide that by the number of acres that it's on, that's about $660,000 an acre. So this 453, remember, it takes some of those buildings that are not quite as attractive, if you want to use it, whatever value, and average them together to come into the 453. So I think it's a darn good,
Achievable.
it's a good average, I think. It's not low and it's not, inflated because we want to beat our chest and act like we're creating all of this. So I think it's a good number.
And what goes into that number, Billy was saying, so you keep in mind that where the numbers came from to inform that are from known cases of fully developed property throughout that Route 60 corridor. So
On assessed
that's
value.
helpful. On assessed, only we're talking about assessed value.
And it's called the book.
Go up.
Jamie educated me many years ago. That's called the book.
So it ends up being conservative, is a good point. Yeah, you're right. So, I mean, I think that's, and anything, if we got very far away from that, it falls into a realm of speculation upon which our confidence, drops, a number of levels. At least this is defensible in the sense of, look, this is actually what we have on these that have in fact been fully developed.
Do we need to keep going west?
Yes, yeah.
Okay, so, yep,
I
let's
don't
bring
think
it
we had any
over.
questions about those are kind of self-explanatory. The ones that we added,
The cutoff of the discussion is right where that cursor
We
is
had-
here, right next to these.
I'll let John take the ones up on top.
yeah.
Yeah.
yeah,
So-
more.
This is interesting. So there's a high school there, you might know where that is, and there's a water tank across from the high school.
Yeah, there's the high school.
So there's 4 parcels that are contiguous that are essentially opposite the high school. So the idea behind identifying those as economic priority was also associated with workforce development and the high school students. That entire area, if somebody was to want to do one large project or several projects, would be to have jobs, within walking distance of the high school, as opposed to gateway business or residential or something else. That also happens to be a really busy corner right there. And we've had a lot of issues with the student drivers, well, not necessarily them, but just accidents, issues due to traffic there. So this also takes into account some previous thoughts about extending, I believe it's Batterson Road behind the high school. So it kind of cut through eventually through right-of-way reservations or donations to behind the high school, which then connects to Carter Gallier. So it takes that concept of having a parallel roadway, and instead of having to come out by Frisbees, you could see where with a little bit of work, you could maybe envision another small, short, much less than Carter Gallier new roadway in the comp plan. And it would go behind the water tank, behind the high school, and it would allow basically anybody coming from like St. John Newman Church all the way to Carter Gallier and then on to, Luckstone and Burger King and everything else. So it extends that idea of considering infrastructure and future land use planning. And it also gives you an additional, I'm going to say 50 plus 60 acres, somewhere in that range. We don't know who owns the parcels or if the same owner owns all 4 parcels, but it creates, pretty much an economic priority opportunity that's not right on Route 60 and might potentially connect to some jobs for the high school students through vocational or just through part-time employment, depending on what goes there.
It is.
Why wouldn't you include the properties to immediate west, those two, that large tract?
Yeah, we talked about those.
We didn't want to get far down the road.
Yeah, we kind of, we kind of stopped there, we run out of time.
And we kind of have the 200, it's got the line, the pseudo line, if you want to call it that. We just didn't want to get down there too far. And we were kind of running plunged, and we talked about that, but we. And if you don't think for a minute that the students haven't figured out they can jump on Old Church and run out and cut through, just go sit down there after school. They'll tell you, they've already figured out how they can get rid of some of the congestion. They can run in Old Church, jump on and cut out, and, so it's already.
Another thing to think about, maybe one last thing anyway, on the, desirability of these light industrial sites is, probably as effective, possibly more effective than just about anything in connecting students, get out of the high school or out of the technical school or out of a four-year college with a job, is our internship programs. That's something that has arisen in the last 15, 20 years. There's a lot of it that goes on. I know when I was still at BCU, school of business, that was a very big deal. And it was very successful. The students really appreciated it. It gave them a huge leg up. Because, if you take a person who's in a high school here and got that start, or in a technical school and got that start, and, was connected up with one of these local operations, and they get to see how it goes day to day. And they can then get to envision themselves as possibly fitting into that or finding this particular area desirable, and they know a little bit better where they might want to be focusing their attention, especially if they got a technical school. And it was very common to find that the result of the internship program, especially for folks that gotten to the technical or to the four-year school, college type, that these things, after you got done with it, would result in a job offer. Because it's a very low to no cost case from the standpoint of the no commitment, from the standpoint of the employer, but the employer gets to see you and see how you work and see how you're coming along and maturing, and then it has to decide, it has to make a very low cost decision on, oh, gee, I would really like to have this young person work here for me, and there comes the job offer in hand. Which may not be the one that you want, but very welcome to have it. And, that's been very successful. So I think the I-1s open that door a whole lot wider. Just something.
As we increase in the county and the schools increase, the CWD, which is Career Workforce Development, all those technical trades, and increase the classes that we have along with what we already are working on. The businesses from our perspective in our office is that they want that. They want to be able to hire someone right out of high school and take the interns, but we need to make those connections, but also increase those companies that the trades we're training for can go to.
Yeah.
So, we're increasing the fabrications and the need for welding, and the need for electrical and all of that. So. I-1 just fits right into adding to that.
So did we do 4138? Did we add that one, or was it already?
Yeah, so 4138 is at the signal on Jude's Ferry. It's opposite on the south side of the road. You can see the 2,000-foot line, the yellow line paralleling Route 60, so you can see how deep that parcel is.
It was already identified, but I think we had to add in a couple of the outliers.
4176?
Yeah, I think I already had it on my list originally, but I think we had to turn it on and add in the outlier parcels that go with it.
You can see underneath it, it was already in the gateway businesses. It's not
It is.
an addition out of 810. This was, well,
Yeah.
maybe out of 810, but it was already planned for a gateway business.
It was, yeah, correct. We just switched it over based on the fact that it is, you've got New Dorset, I think that's Terrace, I think it's Terrace.
Yes, it is.
Going back there
Yeah,
and we've
Dorset
got,
here.
it's another quiet little,
Dorset over here.
street where we've got lots of businesses doing good stuff back there, so we want to increase that, and that just makes common sense to have light industrial abut it. In reality, some of those, that's a great example. Some of those businesses back in there, it's gateway business, a lot of them are CC zoned, but they're really light industrial type of businesses. So, they could easily have that whole little road and area back there be light industrial, but they fit into CC, so let them be. So. Yes, we do. Well, it only goes back a little bit off of 60. So it goes back off behind CNF Bank to where the daycare is, right there.
The whole other drains to the south.
Yes, correct.
So maybe, I don't know, given whatever it is, 422, we might want to take a look at results that come out of this.
Yeah, that would be great.
What the headroom is against the 8515.
Yeah, if you
So-
want to switch it, that'd be great.
Don, go, yeah.
See if everything you did is gonna blow up right now.
I'm sure we get called bad words on
So,
That assumes built out, though.
it.
let me change the share.
We'll make the progress.
This is
the
a
rest
majority
that.
of it too, if you look at the initial parcels that Roxanne identified a few weeks ago. This is the bulk of it, so.
So what you're looking at here is the updated spreadsheet. Now, one comment before we go into this is that you'll see there are 6 parcels up there that are in yellow. Those 6 are not part of our set of parcels to add to the picture here. Rather, these are the parcels that have been rezoned already, but rezoned after the 2024 assessment went into place. So it's reasonable, seemed pretty reasonable to us at this stage that these should be projected on the same basis we project the rest of them. Again, we don't have it, what we've got is the figures based on the history. And I mean, to apply that to them seemed pretty reasonable to us.
It's average assessed value, not
Yeah,
assessed value.
that's
It's
right.
not associated with that.
That's right. And on them, let's see. I want to get,
And this was a public comment that I heard from several people saying if a property was recently rezoned and if they're going to receive a tax bill based on their new assessed value, why aren't we taking that into account with the calculations? And so that, I think, is why.
We are.
Yeah, so I mean, that's-
Smart people that be looked at that house, it's like, makes sense to me.
I said we should have all.
15, yeah.
So we got them in there and, it requires a little bit, some things are a little different here because unlike the remaining set of parcels, you've got both figures that come out of I-1 versus figures that come out of a general commercial. It was not I-1 as part of the discussion. In these cases, the zoning decision's been made, it's in place, so that really doesn't change on one of these parcels as you go, from a category that was an I-1 or a C, whatever it is going to be dictated by whatever category is already in that picture. And then the other aspect, there was, for example, a couple of these that were split in the sense that they were rezoned on a part of the parcel. In some cases, left in A10, the remainder part, or one might have been zoned like one, or in one case, we had one that went to an I-1 on part, and the remainder went to an R2. So that required another little look into the picture. We needed a little information on R2 as opposed to A10, to figure out exactly, what happens over on the residential side when you make this change. But that was easy enough to get because everything that we had from the 2024 assessment database, we could pull out all the R2s from that. I didn't look at anything that was, I did not look at any R2s that were larger. I did look at all the R2s that it's less than 5 acres. I don't think we're talking about, R2 situations here with anything, lot size. Certainly not beyond that. So they kind of capped it at that. But beyond that, your full figures in there, it came out to about 416,000 an acre, is about what that figure is. So, and again, that's a countywide. So that's in here and making those adjustments on those particular parcels. It doesn't come to a great deal because there's not many of these cases. It's a pretty small picture.
That's including improvement.
Pardon?
That's
including
whatever,
the improvement.
right, that's whatever in the assessment.
That's
Whatever's in the
which
assessment.
sits there,
Yeah.
the erection of the house.
Yeah, whatever's in the assessment. Yeah,
Still
that's the M,
out.
whatever the MTOTP, PR
Yeah,
value.
yeah, that's right. I just want to make sure.
So anyway, that's now figured in the overall numbers on both the I-1, on the residential, that's part and parcel of the picture. But they're pretty much fixed in stone at this juncture. Everything else is what all's below this and not highlighted in yellow. And these are the parcels you're talking about. And the set that we're looking at here, there's 37 of them, are the set that Roxanne and that we went through. And I'm only talking about, again, now things up to Jude's Ferry, not beyond that. Right, there are quite a few more beyond that. But these are what's in here. And this particular spreadsheet stops at Jude's Ferry in terms of applications.
So Bob, just for clarity,
Yes, sir.
the yellow is included in this number because
Yes, it is.
that's the dialogue we had,
Yes, it is.
Chris Sulfine and
Yep.
Mr. Donati Senior
Yep.
had the other day, and Roxanne.
Yep, it's all in there. Yes, sir. Okay, so what is the effect of these parcels have on the overall picture? The answer is that set of parcels alone has a lot of impact. Doesn't get us all the way, but it gets us a very long way. I mean, if moving into those parcels, you can see here you're starting up here. I can increase size this a little bit for us.
80, sir.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're gonna make a challenge here. Go maybe one more. How's that? Is that a little bit-
that's good.
better? Okay, great. Okay, so you can see the top line, of course, is the baseline picture from where we start at this point in time. And, they got the all commercial that is, including I-1. And then over here, we've got all residential in quotes, because keep in mind that in the 85-15 calculation, the residential portion of this is pretty much the kitchen sink, which means all the A10 land, all the A10 properties are in this number. That's the way they do it. And it's not peculiar to us. This is the way it's done county to county, as James would sure point out. So that's the picture. Whereas it's a cleaner situation over in the I-1 and then the Cs and so forth. I mean, those are easily identified, you can go right in there and get the picture. And then there's the overall picture, the C plus R, that is to say, the entire assessment picture. So what happens here is if you step down here and you look what would happen if you put them all into general commercial categories, as opposed to I-1, you're looking at an improvement up to 12.2%, and this kind of a number, and brings you down from 93 down to 87.8, which is an 85, but considering we both stopped at Tewksbury Road, not bad. But it's as Roxanne said, there were quite a few parcels that were, that area and east that were, pretty easy for us, to identify, to discuss. And I think that the fruit of that is kind of probably seen here. This is the picture at the bottom, if it all goes to I-1, which is what we're advocating here. And so, and again, as we talked about before, if you're only looking at the assessed value and applying across the acreage, they're very close to the same number here. The big difference arises in the BPP an M&T situation in terms of the revenue to the county and in the nature of the I-1s that are generating jobs that we're interested in. And putting a break on what would appear to be to the citizenry some progression of the Chesterfield experience as you moved on into the county. These are ways to get away from that, to avoid that, and get us businesses that we really are very interested in.
We don't have a formula for that, do we? To add those two that you mentioned.
M&T,
Yeah.
BP.
Well, no, and the problem with that is, James, this, we did discuss this at some length. Now, Jamie's got numbers on BP as a whole, and can provide that, and we can talk about that. It may very, and as you get into the discussion to talk about impact on the overall budget of the county, that suddenly becomes really important. And it has a big upside because the nature of I-1s compared to the general C stuff is, the I-1s in general are likely to develop over a longer period of time and be built out and expanded, which just means more revenue out of that source. But he's not legally, Jamie cannot provide us with parcel level data on BBP. He's by Virginia law, barred from doing it. So he can give us summary numbers, or numbers by grouping, right? He just can't give us the individual data.
We can do aggregates, but, an individual business's BPP is protected by state law, it's proprietary.
But what we can do is kind of what we've talked about a while ago, is I can pick 5, 10 businesses of all the same nature and say, okay, can you conglomerate them together, give me an average out of those 5 businesses and apply that for M&T and BPP, so that we can say, hey, we've selected 5 businesses, they're all fabrication businesses, which, if you've been here, you know which ones they are, but you can at least say M&T and BPP wise, here's what they're doing for us.
And it's much more than 0.1%. So even though this is just slightly lower than commercial, it's much more than that.
Observation, to get to that 12, it's going to take some amount of time.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, I think,
And so if you said 10 years, wouldn't you have to escalate the residential by some average?
Well, and that was one of my
to
questions.
get the true
We haven't even
balance?
applied any changes to residential in this.
So residential growth will take place during that. And I was hung up with this in my head. I'm like, you gotta make the book of residential go up, which then if you make this, still will, but we try to start doing all that and that, and not that, and I agree with the M&T and the BPP, but,
Just as long as we note that.
For
that
this
12
exercise?
Isn't 12.
Well, everything will go up, the residential and the commercial over time. So trying to grow the.
and I think
I
from
mean,
a
you've got to
board,
be cognizant that, we pointed out before, when you look at this thing, I mean, what that ratio is, see back over here, for example. The ratio is just the commercial side over the commercial plus the residential, which is the whole thing. So it's obvious that the commercial to residential ratio is what is exactly driving this. And, while we can't, while we're not in a position to predict exactly what those numbers turn out to be, one thing we do know is if we focus too strongly, or we focus strongly at all on the residential at the expense of commercial and industrial, we're gonna find ourselves further behind the 8 ball on the 85-15. So we've gotta be careful.
Yeah.
But that doesn't preclude it. That just says you need to be cognizant of this, because it's moving in the wrong direction on that.
To answer your question directly, though, this ignores
Yeah,
an increase in residential.
you want this to say
You could-
25 or 20%.
you could say, Jamie could probably come up with a formula, say, residential's gonna grow at 3%, let's just do that, and then you could formulate that through there. But to me, what we were asked to do is provide the board some type of tangible way to say, okay, how do I shift it 2%? Well, if it's 2% equals this many acres of development at an average, then, wow, we got one case that got it, 2%, we're rolling, let's go to 4, and then we can shift, but before it was hard to say, okay, we want to get to 85-15, well, how do we get there? You know, and so to me, this is a tool that gives them the ability to scorecard themselves and set an objective goal, you know, to try to achieve the shifting of it. That's what you're looking for.
It is, but, you know, and to your point, with this in place, there's absolutely nothing stopping you from providing scenarios filtered directly in here and seeing the impact of it. I mean, it's all live to that. You can change it, you can change it permanently, but you can change it temporarily just to kind of give yourself.
And I think Mr. Nadi Senior painted a picture to us a little while ago. That if you can bring clarity to it and then tangible to say this will help, and then your board hopefully will have, not the, I shouldn't say the intestinal fortitude, whatever it may be, to say this is the right thing to do. You know, it's on the comprehensive plan, it fits, you know, the future land use plan, blah, 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 blah. And then you don't get that, you know, tug and war that goes on in much of the board meetings with, you know, understanding or why you're doing this or whatever it is. And it's not that people are wrong, you know, it's just, I guess, as a board member, I guess they're looking for clarity, you know, and I don't think you ever get abstract. You know, if you do.
But I think it is, and you know, Billy, it is worthwhile recognizing, you know, that this is somewhat conservative in the sense that the upside in terms of improvements to property that are likely to take place are not in the numbers. We don't know that. And whatever that is additional cushion for us that places this on a, you know what I'm saying, a conservative footing as opposed to, you know, we went out here and we stretched this thing as far as we could and we really don't much have foundation underneath us anymore. I think that's probably a pretty useful thing. The progress that's made here just as far west as we look today on Jude's Ferry Road, seeing how far that takes you from 6.7 all the way up to 12 change against the 15 goal is interesting in itself. Now, if we look, you know, and this has to come with more of a caveat. Let me change this here. And move.
Now you can go behind the curtain and show us what these changes with the rest of it is?
Well, so, let's see here, so this is, yes, let's share that. All right, did that update there? Let's see, yeah, 53, it's the right one. Okay, so here is the spreadsheet that shows what is currently on the table, everything up through the Jude's Ferry area and on out to Maidens. But I say, you know, with a real caveat here, because this has not gotten the level of examination in the subcommittee that those ones out at Jude's Ferry do, so anything said here is preliminary. It gives you an idea about, you know, where you might go vis-a-vis the goal. And I could run the map back here in a minute, but when you put that in, what you see here is actually 16 and change with it, which more than meets the goal, right? It provides some additional, yeah, over there, which is pretty encouraging.
So unless we're missing something, we'll be at 15% at our next meeting with the subcommittee, going through every single parcel with adjacencies and infrastructure and everything that we've been working on and talking through, just to make sure it's a reasonable approach.
So have y'all, me and I gotten to this yet, have y'all discussed the gap yet and whether the recommendation is the gap's in or out?
Yes.
We had not a lot.
I think,
So if it's too early, that's fine.
No, it's not too early.
well, I don't think it's exactly too early. We can look right here. So you can see over on this side.
Different share.
Yeah.
Different share.
Oh, I didn't share that. Oh, yeah.
We can't see what you're looking at.
Gotcha.
Is there any questions about the spreadsheet? It's like high science here, so.
Did you look, or will you look down towards Beaumont where there's water?
No, we didn't go that as far.
We didn't look
went to
there.
60, just because the water at Beaumont is not infrastructure we can currently use without massive money putting into it.
Well, you have to treat the water.
Yeah.
You could probably do sewage, but you could, yeah, but we haven't looked, we haven't even had dialogue on one from an economic development standpoint.
I mean, we've got here, you can see, I don't know if you can see where I'm moving the hand there, the cursor. So that's Jude's Ferry Road, right along there. That's what we had on the map a few minutes ago. So now we're talking about beginning to move west. And that the west means it begins with these over here, and then kind of moves along here, and then recags up, and here comes the gateway again on the western side, which you can see the purple.
Where's that?
That's Academy.
Academy Road right there?
Yeah.
Just east.
Yeah, Academy Road,
Okay,
yes,
gotcha.
yes. And I think what you can see here is.
And that's Red
that-
Lane, I'm sorry, on the south side, you see the
Yeah,
parcel.
red lane right down in there, yes, right here, right here. And I think what you can see here, well, that question about the gap. This in the main, preserves the gap. It had, that's a piece that we'd argue about, and we got to discuss this, south of Red Lane there across 60.
That's the only piece.
That's the only piece, but that is a piece. This one out here that is, looks like a flag lot here, do you see that? That parcel was already in the gateway. That's not new to the picture. So the only thing being added here into this area is this one parcel. And there was reasoning on this, although it hadn't been discussed in detail yet. But I think in the main, right now, it holds the gap in place. And, you know, we've always talked about this before. To the standpoint of the citizens, and many of the citizens, maintaining the gap is very useful. It's a worthwhile thing from the standpoint of giving you a character that is distinct from what you find in Chesterfield County, where, as we said before, as the subcommittee, as soon as you pass Windy Hill, it looks pretty much the same here, you know, for a long, long way as you go through the county. And rather than have that, we try to do what we can, especially in these I-1 parcels, by maintaining the buffers, but is to have a serious break in the picture in the county here, where you've not just, you know, say, wave your hand, allow the commercial rooftops to fit in. It's an important thing.
Well, there's no gap on Wall Street, so you just have to drive it.
You just have to drive it.
Yeah. It's called skateboarding. You want to know what it looks like without a gap.
Gap out there to have range all.
But
Not for long though.
No,
But it's important to I think a lot of people, and I'm sure if we got into that gap, we would hear from it, we'd hear from it quickly. If we start to get aggressive, and then fortunately for us, the ability to meet the goal can be satisfied without going into that gap. And so I think that's a real plus. And we had no idea going in. We just had no idea going in how it was going to play out.
so as a working group, is the gap important to the working group? That's something to discuss at the next meeting. 'Cause
I think we'll roll our sleeves up.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so we haven't talked about any of this left. That's just a quick look. Those of you thinking, well, is there
If you run
a
it to
possibility we're going to
5.2,
get there?
We
You know what I'm
see,
saying?
we can
With
see
this
the
plan, and the answer is-
Yeah, Bob, can you just run it to 522 so they can kind of get
to
to
see where it's Skaggs
Yeah,
Road.
yeah, yeah.
all that stuff is,
Yeah,
yeah?
so here's this, the major,
That's 522.
arterial is 522, that's Maiden's right there. So it's kind of stop, frame of reference for the discussion. This, we established in the full CWG, our first meeting kind of stops there at 522.
There's two large parcels there. I think Adams Oil is in there somewhere.
It's a little, yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
You know, and if you go past 522 just a ways, you have a rapid manufacturing, which is a manufacturing business
Yep.
that has actually at one point had an intern program with the school
Still there.
that they were very good job with.
Right,
But that's out there.
yeah, I'd be on that, we wouldn't bring that up. I mean, you can see that the parcels are just took off there for the moment. You can see that these are not, in fact, those particular ones are within what we already had designated in the land use plan as gateway. They were not, these are not, A10s that were not even part of the picture. Just trying to designate, as Roxanne pointed out, opportunities within the gateway where it would, we think I-1 could work here, light industrial. So I think in a nutshell, that's, Roxanne, I think that's kind of where the
Pretty much where we're
committee,
at.
where the subcommittee is, and we feel, I think we've done so pretty good in the next.
So our goal would be to, on the 18th, we'll come back with, hopefully,
There's not that many we gotta look at here, Billy, compared to what we already have.
well, I got my spreadsheet, it's not a lot that we didn't work on the other day.
Yeah. So
It works. Thank y'all.
Yeah.
Very good work.
I think so, really well.
Absolutely.
I don't know if it's been, no, it's going to be, now we're doing it Sunday, I mean, you went, you're great.
Super Bowl this weekend, so
You know,
maybe
we'll be-
yeah.
well, it's- Unless you're frying chicken wings.
Oh, yeah.
Thank you for being here.
My team's already out of that one.
Any comments on what we've already discussed in case we need to revisit anything for the next subcommittee?
So I guess,
There were-
one thing I would say is if you can get to this map, Roxanne
Yes.
sent the link out. If you go home and you're sitting around, with no cable TV as Bill did, and you wanna just play in the map and you see a parcel that looks like it, that we either missed or you got a question on, then please, or if you've got an idea on something we haven't talked about from Jude's Ferry West, send this and say, please look at and discuss, here's my 2 cents on parcel 44-68.
And the same for the citizens. It's out there for
Absolutely.
anybody to look at.
Absolutely.
It is, it's out there for anybody to look at.
And you
For
know,
the
those,
3 people that are watching us.
people who look at, you may see this after the recording.
They are going back and looking at the recording. I mean, just to give you some statistics, it looked like there was only, I think, 3 watching it live last time, but there are people that are going back and looking at.
Mike shared in for that.
So, you know, one of the things always, you always learn something new every day. So we're in our working group last week. Mr. Donati Senior says, by the way, I want to let you know, I hope I'm not upsetting you, I'm colorblind. So when you start talking about looking at a red parcel and a gold parcel and a green parcel, I don't see any of that. And I'm like, wow. So we kind of had to use a pointer and read numbers and all that, and I thought, wow, you know what?
But Bill
Worked through it.
It did, yeah, Bill did really well, because I mean, while it might not appear in the same exact way you saw it, Bill was able to see the differentiation
Yeah,
in the shading, which they
Yeah,
allowed to do it. And coupled with Don manning the pointer.
I'm like,
It really
wow.
worked out well. I thought
It was.
Yeah, so the goal is we're gonna do a subcommittee meeting a week from today and then a meeting with the full group a week after that. So that for any citizens that want to comment, like this would be the right time to be looking at that so that we have something similar to a finished product in 2 weeks. And it's essentially the land use designations on the GIS map and then the spreadsheet that basically calculates out the potential increase in assessed value for the 8515 goal in the strategic plan. That's what we're working on.
Are you just confining it to the 64 to not looking at?
Only looking at the
We
Route
didn't-
64, there's not any, for that goal. And I mean, the goal was kind of, and they kind of focused this on this.
And there will be some additional avenues, we realize that there will be some additional avenues if anything happens on, at the whole interchange down there.
We should have time next week to look at what else, you know, I mean, the 8515 was countywide, right? It was the goal for the board, so.
Right, it's countywide, and I mean, but.
I mean, that's why we did most of this, so that we could cover loose ends, so I'll make a note of that. That's,
It gets done. I mean, we were directed specifically to the designated areas along Route 60, and then reference to what was already in the village center character, whether it was 7-Eleven village area or the courthouse village area. So, I mean, to talk about that, you know, totally within what were the direction of the.
yeah, it was
charge.
whatever time we have, we'll go through that too, so we can talk about it at the next meeting. And this is just a tool to achieve that goal. The actual goal, I think, is gonna be measured based on actual changes in the current tax split, which is 6.7 versus 93.3.
Right.
So as that 93.3 comes down, that would be an indication that the plan is working. We're not gonna go back to like a spreadsheet to figure it out. It'll be actual assessed value and a change in the tax burden from residential to hopefully light industrial.
Yeah, that's good.
And it'll take a long time to see that number move. That's gonna move slowly.
So Roxanne, I'm going to put together, send you GeoJSON that you can give to Jim Garcia and then brought in, and then when you have that, you can put out the same map for folks to be able to access as you did on the last go round.
Right.
So we'll do that.
That would be great.
And I'll get her a copy of, so we send out everybody the updated spreadsheet, so you can see what the numbers are that went along with it. So, all right, it's good. I'll get you the GeoJSON sometime tomorrow. Should be able to.
Mr. Chairman, I do have one correction to the minutes as I glanced at.
Oh.
If it's not too late.
No,
On page 3, middle paragraph says, as continued discussion, Doug
I have that one already.
suggested the idea of Mr. Doug Bradford.
yeah,
I got it.
she got it.
His wife calls him many names.
All right, so that's a good segue into two just real quick things to touch on before the end. We are gonna make sure that the subcommittee is live online
Yes.
this time,
I got
okay?
it. Yes.
That we had talked about that very early on, and there was just some
Confusion.
technical confusion and some things that happened, so it did, the recording did make it up there, it was recorded, but it wasn't live online, so it will be this time, just making sure everybody and citizens that are paying attention will know that. And we'll have the link to that on the same CWG, county website, on the CWG page.
Yeah,
We'll
yeah,
call it.
same link.
Yeah, and then the last one is the citizen comments. There was some discussion that happened over the last couple of days. It was, limited on some characters, wasn't clear on what documents could be uploaded or, to it. So we've cleaned a bunch of that up. Carly, was that just yesterday? I feel like I've been,
There were a couple of-
are you sure? I think it was just yesterday. Today's only Tuesday, so it was, yeah.
There was a lot happening.
Yeah, so it started last week, but it got cleaned up yesterday. You can now have up to 5,000 characters typed in, so it can hold things, but if you'd rather put it in a different document, you can type it in Word, PDF, basically anything that's not an EXE, as long as it isn't trying to execute something on the website, you can do it in any format you want and just upload the document. And Ligon is gonna be sending or forwarding us those in batches as they come in, because we know there's a few from this weekend that we haven't seen yet.
So we know that you're there. I think that basically, you basically want to sweep that email folder, Liam,
Yeah, I did.
no more than every other day.
I had one, but,
Did we lose any in this process? Or did somebody know it didn't go through?
They were just limited about the number of characters.
So they
Right.
would know they got cut off.
Right, they were typing and it
It
just
just
stopped.
stopped.
It
Okay.
wouldn't let them go any further.
Okay, so they know it,
But I
okay.
think, I don't think you want to go more than every other day to sweep it and put it out. Because, we need time to digest it and, going into the next meeting, whether it's a subcommittee or the full meeting, anything that the folks had to say to us, we need time to see that.
We have time to digest
and,
it. I agree.
Pay attention to it.
Especially economic development, because we don't want this to be.
And all of a sudden, we're on the 18th and we got 42 comments that
Right.
we didn't read.
Right, we want them now.
No, that's-
You're almost there. I'll show you when we return. All right, that's all I had on the agenda. Anything else anybody have for the good of the group?
Move we adjourn.
Motion to adjourn, all right.
6 minutes early.
Wow, look at that.
Outstanding.
Yeah. Nice work. I tell you, I appreciate all that y'all done. That's tremendous work bringing it forward.